Were you ready? All right. I was just making sure the microphone was up and running. Uh, Welcome, everyone. If you would join me in just a quick prayer as we begin this evening's town hall. Dear Lord, we thank you for gathering us this evening, your people who care so much about you, about the goodness and graciousness of which you have extended. We pray for discernment. We pray for wisdom as we continue in this process. We ask that you provide that guidance and that counsel that will lead us to continue to further your kingdom in whatever we decide and whichever way we go. In your most holy name we pray. Amen. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm David Blanks. I'm the current chair of the TLUMC Church Council and a member of the Next Steps Task Force. And joining me up this evening is our Jen Filla, who is the leader of the Next Steps Task Force. And extend a welcome to those here this evening. We've got a very robust crowd, so thank you for coming. And we also have quite a few online. Just a reminder for those who are joining us online, to facilitate the overall conversation, we have you muted. So you can type something in the chat should you have a question at this particular time. And when we open up for questions and answers at the very end, we have Sam and Carrie who will be able to let us know that there is an online question that we can address, but didn't want folks online to think that we were just shunning them, because that certainly is not the case. And we're certainly not shunning you, because we know that you're taking time out to educate yourself. And that's what has been the overall purpose of the Next Steps Task Force for the time that we have been meeting. And tonight is, as it indicates up on the slide, the fourth town hall, provide overall information to the congregation as we go through this particular process and where we're at. So next slide, please. So in tonight's town hall, this is our fourth and final planned town hall covering the topics related to the possible disaffiliation from the broader United Methodist Church. And tonight's presentation is going to focus on the timeline that the Mountain Sky Conference, our annual conference, has provided us for 2023. And we'll look at some of the key dates, not all of them, but the key ones that we know of that will facilitate the timeline of which we have to make a determination. And we'll also cover some financials, and I'll go ahead and let that out. What we have are the numbers that we presented several town halls ago, as we have not yet been provided the 2023 numbers, but we will refresh what those 2022 numbers were and what we know and what we don't know. After I've gone through those first few slides, then Jen's going to get up and provide a synopsis of the first three town halls that we have had, as just a reminder of where we have gone. And then the final will be, where is the Next Steps Task Force going? What is the Church Council going to do? And if and when we get to the potential for a vote by the congregation on potential disaffiliation. So with that in mind, we'll go to the next steps. Our next slide, which talks about the timeline for 2023. And next slide, please. So this is only got two slides on the timeline. This is only a portion of the overall task that the Mountain Sky Conference has laid out, and they did similarly for 2022 for what we went through, had the opportunity to look at earlier in the year, and what we have as far as what we're looking at for 2023. And I'm only going to point out a few of them. The first and foremost is when local congregations within the Mountain Sky Conference have to submit an application should they want to disaffiliate in 2023. And if a local congregation wants to disaffiliate, then they have to submit that application by January 13th of 2023. And with that application, they have to make an announcement to the Mountain Sky Conference on when is the church conference vote going to occur. And that vote would have to occur by March 31st of next year. So that first date that we are up against or considering is that January 13th date. It was when it's a fairly straightforward application process saying, a local congregation, and we'll use our case in particular, a Tri-Lakes is considering disaffiliation, and that we are scheduling a church conference vote for such and such date. Similarly, by the 13th of January, the minutes from when the Tri-Lakes United Methodist Church Council meeting occurred, where the church council made the vote to pursue disaffiliation. So similarly, earlier in the year, we had the church council, we were sitting up front at the table and we were talking about potential disaffiliation in 2022. And at that time, the church council did not recommend sending to the congregation a vote for the congregation to vote for disaffiliation. I know I'm using a lot of the words repetitively, and we can certainly clear up any misunderstanding on that. But by January 13th, if the church council recommends sending the vote to the congregation, that would have to occur on or before the 13th of January. By the 31st of January, we would, as Tri-Lakes, receive the preliminary estimate of the disaffiliation cost. And I'll go over those in just a few slides of what we had for the 2022 timeframe. So that would be the time when we get that. This is what Mountain Sky has said. This is the financial obligations to the local congregation for disaffiliating. And then, as I mentioned, by the 31st of March of next year, the special church conference must occur to hold that disaffiliation vote. And we'll cover in more details what that will entail, what the threshold is for disaffiliation. Next slide, please. Few other dates just to be aware of. The May 11th is when after a church that has voted to disaffiliate would submit that disaffiliation petition to the Mountain Sky Conference with all the exhibits. And the exhibits are numerous. They're financial exhibits. It's a listing of members, etc. So there's a whole host of items that a local congregation would have to submit to the Mountain Sky Conference. And that's the timeline and when they have to submit that paperwork. Is May 11th. By June 7th of next year, the church that has chosen to disaffiliate would have to complete the formation of its corporate entity, to which in their terms, the legal liability transfers from the Mountain Sky Conference upon disaffiliation. In layman's terms, it is, who are you going to associate with, and ensuring that all the legal processes are setting up to transfer from the broader United Methodist Church to whatever particular affiliation that the new congregation would affiliate with. On that same date, in June 7th, all of the total financial obligations would have to be paid to the Mountain Sky Conference. So that's something to be aware of as well. And I'll mention a little bit more about that in a couple of slides about the financial obligations. Finally, and as far as a date to be aware of, on June 22nd is when the Mountain Sky Conference actually holds their annual conference to consider all the local congregations that have petitioned for disaffiliation. So this is their gathering of their leadership we, the Mountain Sky Conference, have received a petition for disaffiliation from Tri-Lakes United Methodist Church. It's either affirmative, either agree as the Mountain Sky Conference to allow you to disaffiliate or not. I really don't know why they would not allow, but that is, it's a formality that they have to pursue. One thing to be clear about throughout this timeline, if we as Tri-Lakes elect to disaffiliate, and then for whatever reason, we choose to stop the process, we change our minds, we find the monies are way too much, we just, for whatever reason, we can stop the process. We are not obligated just because we said we're going to hold a vote. We're not obligated just because the vote turned out in the affirmative to disaffiliate. We're not obligated just because we submitted all the petition paperwork to follow through completely, to follow through on that disaffiliation. So I say that repetitively just so folks understand that I understand this is acrimonious. I understand there are many feelings on both sides of this particular issue, and that things change. And so as the Next Steps Task Force has tried to provide that overall information and has tried to be neutral in providing that information to all of us, want to understand that that process is not a one and done as far as if you make up your mind for whatever reason you wanted to change later. So I spent some time on those dates, just as those have been provided to us by the Mountain Sky Conference, primarily looking at that early January timeline for when we would have to make a decision on to apply for disaffiliation, and by the 31st of March of when the congregation would have to hold a vote one way or the other. All right, transitioning a little bit in the next couple of slides. Just wanted to remind you all about the financials that we know of and the ones that we don't know about. And I highlight under each one, these are to 2022 numbers. We have asked for the numbers for 2023. Mountain Sky has said they would like to provide those to us, but as of today, they have not provided us the 2023 numbers. These are still the categories. These are the rough numbers. I don't expect them to change dramatically one way or the other, but just to refresh you all about where we are on that. The first is that unfunded pension liability. And from 2022 number, it was just over $191,000 that Tri-Lakes would be responsible for to pay to Mountain Sky Conference for the unfunded pension liability. Second category is the unfunded obligation for retiree healthcare, and that was just under $91,000. And again, that was the category provided. Third main category was apportionments. That's 2 full years of apportionments that are listed. Given that the decision, should we pursue disaffiliation in June of 23, we would have already paid 6 months of that apportionment. The number would be something less than that, because the number of 192,866 reflects our current 2-year amount of apportionments. So our total and kind of of the 3 known broad categories is $475,112, and that again is the 2022 number. Don't expect the 2023 number to change dramatically from that. Next slide. The one that we have spent a great deal of time in our town halls talking about, and one that we still do not have any clarity on, is the property negotiation. Remember, for those that attended our town hall presented by Reverend Rainwater from the Mountain Sky Conference, Mountain Sky is able to, along with other conferences, determine the specific application of the disaffiliation process in accordance with the Book of Discipline in that special paragraph we've talked about, 2553. And one of those areas is property negotiation, and what Reverend Rainwater stood right here at up on the altar area and said that number would not be known until after a congregation has made their vote to disaffiliate. If a congregation chooses not to disaffiliate, it's a non-issue, as well as those prior numbers. But if a congregation chooses to disaffiliate, then the Mountain Sky Conference, in our case, would enter into a property negotiation, and we do not have a formula. We do not have an idea of what that number would be. We've asked, We asked Reverend Rainwater while he was here, and unfortunately, that number is not forthcoming at this time. What I will say in fairness to Reverend Rainwater, he said, for those local congregations within the Mountain Sky Conference that have already elected to disaffiliate, that the Mountain Sky Conference did not choose to charge anything for property negotiation for them. But he did not give a threshold one way or the other when it applies to other congregations considering disaffiliating. So that's why the grand total is a question mark. The prior page, we talked about 475,000 property negotiation unknown. So the last last item I wanted to highlight on this particular slide is that our finance as well as some folks who have dealt closely with the finance of the church have spoken with our provider, our mortgage provider, at least and Tri-Lakes continues to be in good financial health, and there would be no prohibition against our financial provider lending us the monies that would be needed to disaffiliate if our congregation so chose. So it's a statement on one hand, it says, we know that Tri-Lakes is a strong, caring congregation, that you have good financial backing, and it should not be a prohibitor on a vote one way or the other saying we're going to empty all of our coffers should we choose to go to disaffiliate. It would be that there is an opportunity for this congregation to several different options that would be explored should we choose to disaffiliate. One of those being we could borrow the sum required for the total financial cost associated with disaffiliating. All right, I know I jumped around both dates and cost, and those are always sensitive topics. And we can come back to that during the question and answers if I didn't come across clearly enough in my points. But now I want to turn it over to Jen to go through our prior town halls and where were our plans going forward.
Thanks, David. Right. Hi. Okay, so I'm just going to go over, kind of summarize the information that we've had available so far in our town halls. We've had 3 before tonight. Some of you, actually, a lot of you were there for, I think, all of them. Some of you may not have been. All of our town halls are available on the Next Steps page on the TLUMC website. So if you're interested in looking more in depth into what one or all of these town halls included, go out to the webpage and pull up those recordings for you to watch. So the first town hall was a history lesson. And I'm going to go over the history, but I'm trying to make it super brief. So it's not going to be like an hour's worth. But the quick and not thorough summary of the history was that the United Methodist Church was established in 1968 by bringing together 2 different denominations. One was the Methodist Church, the other was the Evangelical United Brethren. What this did was bring 2 different standpoints on doctrine and moral standards. We meshed them together and created the United Methodist Church. What happened over the history was these 2 viewpoints were never really able to come completely together. It's been kind of contentious through the whole lifespan of the United Methodist Church. Late in the 20th century, so like the latter, like 1990s, was the first conflicts over not just the LGBTQ issues, but also abortion and political issues. The concept of separation of these 2 ideologies, these 2 factions within the United Methodist Church, first was proposed in 2004 at the 2004 General Conference, but that was widely rejected. There's been contention and conflict throughout the years, but in 2016, it came to a bit of a head that despite language in the current Book of Discipline to the contrary, Annual conferences began ordaining non-celibate gay clergy, causing the issue of human sexuality to be brought to the forefront of the conflict between the two ideologies. In response to this conflict and the appointment of the clergy, a coalition was formed called the Wesleyan Covenant Association, seeking to either reform the current United Methodist Church or to start a new Methodist denomination separate and apart from UMC. In 2019, there was called a special general conference specifically to address the issue once and for all surrounding human sexuality within United Methodist Church. The result from that special general conference was the passage of the traditional plan, which strengthened the current language in the Book of Discipline around human sexuality and added additional accountability measures for bishops and clergy. The passage of this traditional plan was by a very narrow margin. It was 53% to 47%. So instead of resolving the issues like this general conference was intended to, more conflict and protests arose. So then another plan to resolve the issue was slated for a vote at the regular general conference in 2020, but was postponed due to the COVID pandemic. And then general conference was again scheduled in 2022 and postponed again due to continued COVID-19 concerns. So then, not as a result of the postponement, but it was just, timeline how it went. Wesleyan Covenant Association launched their new Methodist denomination, which is called the Global Methodist Church, and it was launched on May 1st of this year. The current paragraph of the Book of Discipline that is being used to allow for disaffiliation for churches, which is that paragraph 2553 you've heard us talk so much about. This paragraph is set to expire in 2023. The next general conference is scheduled for 2024, and it's unknown if any new disaffiliation provisions will be provided. So because of this, because of 2553 expiring in 2023 and no known path out if a church wants to disaffiliate in 2024, many churches are looking at the issue right now. So if you're asking, okay, why are we here? Why are we even having this conversation? This is why. So that was Town Hall 1, very simplified, because I think I droned on for a really long time at Town Hall number 1. In Town Hall number 2, we had a special guest speaker. It was Reverend Rainwater, who is the superintendent of Congregational Community and Vitality for the Mountain Sky Conference of the United Methodist Church. This is our conference. Reverend Rainwater presented his perspective on the issues surrounding disaffiliation and from the perspective of the United Methodist Church. I would summarize what he said, but honestly, everybody I've talked to heard something just slightly different out of our speaker. So I'm not going to even attempt to try and summarize it, but if you're interested in hearing what he had to say, it's available on the website. And then Town Hall number 3 was in September. And at this town hall, it was presented by Reverend Walter Fenton, who is the Deputy Connectional Officer for the Global Methodist Church. This is the new denomination that was formed by the Wesleyan Covenant Association. Reverend Fenton presented his perspectives on the issues surrounding disaffiliation and from the perspective of the Global Methodist Church. And again, depending on who you talk to, everybody heard something different. So I'm not summarizing his either. And if you're interested in hearing what Reverend Fenton had to say, please go see the videos available on the website. So then we have resources. I keep saying, go check out the website. Here it is. If you pull up the tlumc.org website, you can see the yellow arrow at the very top there. There's a red kind of emblem with little footsteps. That's our next steps icon. And that's how you get into our portion of the webpage. And then if you go there, you will see there's a tab there for town hall meetings. There is a tab there for Pastor Bob's One Flesh study. And then there's a tab for videos. These are videos that were put out by Rob Renfro, who is part of the Global Methodist Church. And then counterpoint videos, kind of in answer to it, I guess, from Adam Hamilton of the United Methodist Church. So if you're out there and you're still wondering, what's the difference? What's the difference between Global Methodist Church? What's the difference between United Methodist Church? These videos go through a number of these issues. The first video is about United Methodist Church in general. Second video covers scripture. The third video covers Christ. The fourth video covers human sexuality. Fifth video covers leaving United Methodist Church versus staying within the United Methodist Church. And video number 6 discusses future options. These are a great resource for you to get like a balance of viewpoints. And I would encourage you to go watch them if you have the time. Each video is about 10-15 minutes in length. They're not super arduous to make it through. So I would encourage you. I found them very interesting. But these resources provide very in-depth information, stuff that I couldn't possibly come up here and spew in an hour. And it also will give you time to digest the information that you're reading and conscientiously sit and think through the issues yourself. So we do urge you, Next Steps Task Force urges everyone to spend some time with the resources that we have available, and always feel free to ask questions. So if you want to know who the Next Steps Task Force is, most of us, actually, I think all of us are here, what's left of us. We have David Blanks and myself. We have Mark Hatfield, Ted Bauman. Raise your hand, Ted. And Jay Kelly. Kim Sullivan is not able to be with us tonight, but if you know Kim and you are more comfortable asking Kim questions, by all means, please reach out to Kim. So then moving forward, what's next? What are our next steps? Hopefully at the very beginning of November, the task force is going to be sending out a questionnaire of sorts, trying to take the temperature of the congregation to see really where we're sitting on this issue. Not just, a handful of people that stand up here every Sunday or at these town halls, but everybody, what are our feelings on this issue? And then that information will be presented to Church Council at that December 6th Church Council meeting, hopefully to inform them on their very important decision that they're going to have to make. So if at that Church Council meeting, if I bolded and underlined it, if Church Council makes the decision to pursue disaffiliation in 2023, we would expect a congregational vote. Well, actually has to happen within 60 days, according to the framework of the United Methodist Church. So you can expect that that very important vote by all of us to happen sometime late January or early February. Just some information that I want to make sure everybody knows. I did cover it in the first town hall, but this vote and these rules are set by the United Methodist Church. They're not set by the task force or Church Council or anything like that. We have no control, but the vote does have to be done in person, only by members of Tri-Lakes United Methodist Church at a time specific. And the reason for this is the district superintendent has to preside over the vote. So unfortunately, we don't do mail-in ballots. We don't do proxy voting, nothing like that. You do have to be present to have your vote count. And then if, and again, that's bolded and underlined if, we as Tri-Lakes United Methodist Church, if our congregation votes to disaffiliate, then you can expect the task force to put together some more town halls on, okay, well, where would we go? Where would we affiliate? What would we do? But right now we feel like there's enough information to be digested without having to focus on that particular issue, because we do have time in the future to then make those decisions. And that, my friends, is the end. We're going to open for questions and comments. All right, come on up.
And just for those that are posing questions, please, for the benefit of all, speak clearly into the microphone and stay close to the microphone. And we all have a tendency to go, "Hey, how are you doing?"
Yeah.
And that's not. So Carol, please.
Okay, hold on. Sam's going to come. So it sounds like that mic's not on.
I thought we tested this.
We did, we had the nerve to say, hey, all the mics are working. Everything's working well. He goes, I just cursed myself. All right, Carol, please.
On the straw vote, is that going to be all attendant people? or is it going to be members only?
You know, it doesn't do us much good to get attendant. We really need to know what our members are going to be voting because that is the only information that really pertains to disaffiliation. We have to have it be members. So we are limiting that questionnaire to members only.
What happens if council votes against disaffiliation?
Oh, you did that.
The process stops. And note, we would not disaffiliate in 2023. And as mentioned, the special paragraph allowing disaffiliation, that 2553 expires in 2023. And when the United Methodist Church General Conference occurs in 2024, unknown if they will offer, if the United Methodist Church will offer congregations an opportunity to disaffiliate. Hence some of the reason for why the Next Steps Task Force has been meeting, why consideration not only in 2022, but for 2023. So the long answer to your very poignant and short question is, if on the 6th of December or that sometime before the 13th of January, if the Tri-Lakes United Methodist Church Council votes not to pursue disaffiliation, then it stops Tri-Lakes from potentially disaffiliating in 2023.
Following up with that question, if we don't disaffiliate, you know that there's two sides to, people are deciding what happens to those who do want to go to the GMC. Where? And where is the GMC?
I don't have a definitive answer for you. I'm unaware of any local GMC congregations being stood up at this time.
Bob, do you have any input? Okay, we don't know.
But, I said earlier, and I hope it doesn't come across flippantly, we know this issue is a challenging one. We know there are passions on both sides. And I characterize it, and it's sad to say it's a lose situation. There are Christian brothers and sisters that we love with all of Christ's love, that we want to continue to spread the good word. Somebody, whatever life circumstances, is going to have an opinion that is different than ours. And that just sets up acrimony and tension. Many of us wish we could wave the proverbial magic wand and this issue wasn't there and we can continue in the wonderful we have such an amazing congregation. It is a blessed congregation. We have it's wonderful. This issue has just been has brought an uncomfortable discussion for many to have to be considered and thought about what it brings on. So whichever way the church council votes, and should the church council send it to the congregation, and whichever way the congregation would vote, I think it would belie reason to believe that there aren't going to be people who are going to vote with their feet one way or the other. I saw your hand, Jamie, but he was quick. He was quicker up on the microphone. Then come on.
Just to follow up, is that straw poll going to be used as and I'm just going to say, if 90% of the straw poll says yes, is council going to use that as meaning however many people on council? Because that means if there's 7 or 8 people on council, they would dictate what would occur.
Well, that's the point of council. I mean, this is information meant to educate council on the feelings of the congregation at whole. So, I mean, if it's a 90% vote yes, I mean, I don't know, I can only speak to myself, but I mean, that is a very large statement that if I were representing the church congregation as a whole, that says a lot, speaks a lot. It would be arrogant to direct this church otherwise. But I can't speak for the other members of the council either, and neither can David.
And I would only add, the converse is true as well. If the straw poll were to say 90% are against pursuing disaffiliation, that is a matter for the rest of the church council to consider on, is it worth the acrimony that we continue to experience in discussing this to send it to the congregation? So it is a tool that the Next Steps Task Force has decided to use to help provide information to the church council for the church council to make a vote on whether further pursue. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I asked this question at, I guess, Mr. Renfro or Pastor Renfro. Is anybody tracking how many churches have left so far in terms of moving votes that changed the book of discipline? So one of the numbers up there was 47 to 53 in terms of strengthening the language in the book of discipline regarding human sexuality. But I think hundreds of churches have left. At this point, I saw like 103 churches or something like that left out of Florida. So have enough churches left? Is somebody tracking this, that this relentless pursuit of progress, if you will, is going to happen? Adam Hamilton, I watched the sexuality thing #4 today, and he seems to think it's a done deal. So I'm wondering if you guys have any input on that.
That's not information that we have. I mean, I suppose that there are people within the UMC that are tracking it, people outside of the UMC that are tracking it, but within us on the task force, no, that's broader than our scope and capabilities.
I think Pastor Bob had a quick comment.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of an idea how delegate counts work. And there's still some question about whether the delegates for the 2024 General Conference will be the 2020 delegates or whether new delegates will be selected. The Judicial Council still hasn't ruled on that yet. So without knowing what that delegate mix is, it's very difficult to determine what potential vote outcomes would be at General Conference. But most people who are in the know would say that things have shifted and are likely to be that conservative majority is likely to be significantly diminished or no longer a majority altogether. So that's where things have been trending based on what you've said with disaffiliation happening, different delegate counts being done. All of that portends, most people think, to it leaning more toward a progressive side in 2024.
And Jamie, because each annual conference is the one that tallies within their particular one. So we heard Reverend Rainwater speak anecdotally about 8 out of approximately 357 in the Mountain Sky that had pursued. But each annual conference, and whether it's the multiple conferences in Florida or whatever, I am unaware of a grand total that is being tracked.
On your tiptoes.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
That's her.
I have just a general question. I've watched all of the town halls online, and so this is my first one being here in person. And then I watched the videos that you mentioned, Jen, and they're really informative. I have a question that I haven't been able to answer yet in listening to the town halls and those videos. And that question is, at least from Adam Hamilton, it sounded like churches who remain in the UMC can still remain centrist in their how they preach and how they, talk about theology and things like that within the church. And so I'm just curious to understand, like, what if we remain in the UMC, like, what changes for our specific church body and how we've been doing things for years and years and years, where there's some people who are more conservative and some people who might have more progressive understanding of scripture. So I'm curious to know what is changing, what will be different that makes it so that our church is no longer compatible with the UMC. I mean, I understand the homosexuality issue, but does that make sense? Like, is there latitude for us as a local, like our congregation to stay, fairly conservative or more progressive, depending on how the congregation changes over time? What's the local, I don't know, what latitude do we have as a local community within the broader spectrum of the UMC? Sorry, long question, very confusing. Hopefully you followed it.
I think I got you. Okay, so my understanding, if the vote were to say not to disaffiliate and we just stayed within the United Methodist Church, I don't believe anything changes immediately. Where you're going to see changes is when you have a pastoral change. And if you know anything about the appointments within the United Methodist Church, pastors are typically moved around about every 7 years. And we just celebrated 12 years with Pastor Bob. So, I mean, I think you can anticipate if we stayed within the United Methodist Church that there would be a pastoral change coming. I mean, maybe not, but at some point you would have to expect it. So then who do they appoint here? They appoint the pastors that they have. I think they would try to do the best. Our congregation does have say, that we get to interview the pastor that comes in ish. Bob's making faces at me. But I mean, we would have some forewarning as to who is coming in, but they would appoint a pastor. I think that's going to be your biggest point of change, is a pastoral change.
It's not an interview, it's an introduction.
Oh, it's an introduction. Do you have anything?
No, I agree. The immediate would not be transparent, but whenever Pastor Bob departs from Tri-Lakes, Mountain Sky gets to appoint the next pastor. Mountain Sky has shown themselves to be a very progressive conference. Local congregations can make their wants known, but there is no requirement that the annual conference meet or fulfill those particular wants. All of that to say is I think a congregation naturally evolves with the leadership that is present. So we would see. That's all. Sorry, that's not a full and complete and fulfilling answer, but that's probably the most accurate. Sam, any questions online? No? All right. Oh, please. Right. Sam, you broke the
Sam, what's up
microphone.
with your mic? Blue.
Try now.
Is there an option that all of these different opinions can just work together in the congregation and continue doing it that way? And because I mean, like you had said earlier, everyone has their different opinions. So is there a way that these opinions can just work together? Thank you.
I certainly would say that the United Methodist Church, as well as the Mountain Sky, has advocated for the big tent type philosophy that it says we are welcoming of all of these different opinions. And people are always going to have varying degrees of opinion. That's just a natural human tendency. So just my personal perspective, a decision to remain by not going with a disaffiliation is to say that we are okay with the philosophy that the Mountain Sky and the United Methodist Church has put out. And certainly the presenting issue is about human sexuality and LGBTQ plus type issues. What I hope that the Next Steps Task Force across multiple town halls has presented is that there is also broader theological challenges. And there's also the issue of that I brought up with Reverend Rainwater on accountability when it comes specifically to our bishop in the Mountain Sky Conference. So speaking just personally for myself, it is an idea of, yes, I value your opinion, I value your perspective, but I also value when someone says they're going to uphold a particular portion of the Book of Discipline that they took an oath of serving when they accepted their ordination, and then have violated that oath, that there's no accountability. So that was strictly a David Blank's personal injection, and it doesn't try to diminish anybody's personal opinion.
So whose job is it then for the accountability? Is that supposed to be?
There is a council of bishops. First, there has to be a charge leveled or that is brought up and says, I or whomever we think that such and such is in violation of the Book of Discipline. And that has been made known specifically for our bishop. My understanding, and I'm just a layperson, I'm not an expert in the polity of United Methodist Churches, then a council of bishops acts as a quasi judicial review and goes, the council of bishops we've reviewed, we either agree or disagree that there's been a violation, and here is the consequences for violating. And that particular portion of the process did not fully transpire. As far as Bishop Oliveto has declared her particular position, has openly stated that she has conducted marriages and I'm sorry, it's my but the Council of Bishops did not bring up the case, nor did they go in not specific terms. They go, we the Council of Bishops acknowledge that she says she violated her oath, but we're not going to remove her from office. We're not going to violate her. We're not going to fine her or do any of those other consequences.
People that aren't involved in the Council of Bishops that are supposed to be involved in holding this bishop accountable, people that aren't involved in that process are now trying to set a movement to disaffiliate from those people because they think that those people aren't doing their job. So now they think that it's their job.
There's one perspective. Another certainly would be, here are the rules you chose, and the progressive faction of the United Methodist Church is saying the Book of Discipline, as it currently states, has a prohibition against practicing clergy being practicing homosexuals. The progressive wing wants to remove that wording from the Book of Discipline. That wording still exists today. October 25th, 2022, that wording is still in the book. Consider it like a law on the books today. The progressive wing would like to remove that, but they have been the progressive wing has been unsuccessful in removing that wording. So I understood your argument, and
I just wanted to know, I just wanted to kind of understand more in depth when you say holding someone accountable.
Sure.
Why and who and why are we doing that? So thank you.
Good. No worries.
So far, I want to talk about money. So far, we have the estimate of 475,000, almost $500,000 for the cost of disaffiliation. If due to property negotiations, I think that's what we're calling it, right? From the conference, If that amount to borrow for disaffiliation goes higher, will there be a limit set as to the amount our church would be willing to borrow for disaffiliation costs? Or will we pay whatever amount is assessed, no matter how high?
The simple answer is it's not a blank check. And that was why I kind of continue to emphasize that at any point in the process, that should the church should try like say, yep, we're going to disaffiliate. And then with the property negotiation comes back and it is 83,422,000,000, we go, okay, that's probably just a little bit more than I can pull out of my checkbook today. Then we could withdraw from disaffiliating. What I was trying to set out was there is a range of numbers that could go in, and certainly the church council would review those numbers, and it would behoove, we are trying to have been transparent, remain transparent. This church council meetings are open, both online and in person. As that property negotiation number became known, we would share that with the congregation and make a more informed choice at that time.
And however, if the number comes out after the vote, unfortunately, we will have already taken the vote and kind of split our ways and decided to disaffiliate, but then be unable to disaffiliate because there would be a limit. If it was too high, that's essentially what would happen. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Okay.
I was just waiting for Sam. Yeah, I think that's a fair characterization that, and you can read into Mountain Sky, well, lots of ways of why they don't want to provide a formula, why they're not giving us a number. And some certainly have seen less than forthright rationale behind that particular matter.
Question is about most monies given to the church go to the general fund unless they're otherwise earmarked. It is from this fund where most of our current debts are paid, mortgages, bills, etc. Will the payments for the disaffiliation loan come from the general fund as well?
In short, yes. I'm sorry, Rob, did you want to? Yeah. So, I mean, I was speaking about finances, but yes.
Green.
We're getting into things that in addition to this whole process, there are, complications. We basically have three pots of money. There are general fund. There are designated funds. Designated funds are those that are authorized by the council and may be changed. And then there are temporarily restricted funds. Temporarily restricted funds, we must follow those. We do have some funds, about half. Basically, if you take the temporarily restricted funds, that amount is maybe 60% of the total of temporarily restricted and designated. We have about 50,000 in designated funds that we could, keyword is could, use as general fund. That could be converted.
I think the council will present a range of options of how that the church, that Tri-Lakes would want to fund it if and when we get to that point.
I hope that the council and the committee talks to Linda Pelletier. I think we all know her. She used to be a pastor here. Her church just affiliated. They didn't get burned for their land at all. They still have it.
Right. And that's where I was trying to be fair to Reverend Rainwater when you talked about those local congregations and within the Mountain Sky that have disaffiliated. Thus far, they have not, their Mountain Sky has not passed along any substantial property negotiation bill. Yes, ma'am.
Earlier, there was a question asked, if we do not disaffiliate, where will I go? I'm going to ask the question, if we do disaffiliate, where will I go? I'm a divorced woman. I had asked a yes or no question to Mr. Fenton that night. Would I be allowed to teach Sunday school? Yes or no? His simple answer is no. A divorced woman would not be allowed to teach Sunday school in the Global Methodist Church. I would receive, maybe not, but this is what he said, and this is the person we brought in to ask questions. It may not be accurate, but we brought him in, and this is what he's told me. And I do believe there were other people who heard it, but he said that I would be counseled. Is that correct, Bob? That I would be counseled. And then after the counseling, after my assessment, that I would be able to teach Sunday school, but there would have to be counseling. I just feel like there's some hard questions that haven't been asked about what's going to happen in the Global Methodist Church. I know
Well-
nobody has an answer for where would I go. But for 20 years, I've been coming to this church, and I love all the people on both sides. And they all have valued me and have helped me raise my children and helped me with my walk with God, even though we've disagreed. But thank you.
Yeah, and let me address that. Here's how I would put it. These are all pastoral things that we deal with. Life is messy. People find themselves in all kinds of different situations. And I love all the people who are here, no matter where they find themselves. So we have conversations about these things. And this happens in all kinds of situations. But there's no blanket that says you can't do this because of this. The Global Methodist Church has left a lot of leeway for pastors to make pastoral decisions about leadership, and Walter did say that. I would exercise that as well. It's a pastoral decision. It's not a denominational decision about that. The other thing, though, is that the Global Methodist Church is not your only option if you disaffiliate. You could remain an independent church. You could choose from a wide range of other Wesleyan denominations or non-Wesleyan denominations. You'd be free to choose. So the Global Methodist Church is not your only choice. Does that help? No, because that's a secondary issue. The Next Steps Task Force hasn't even taken that up.
Yes, I got that, Bob. So that is one point that that I discussed actually tonight, is that only is after those two bolded and underlined ifs, right? So we have some big ifs going on right now. If the church council sends it for a vote, congregational vote, and then if the congregation votes to disaffiliate, then the Next Steps Task Force comes back around and we start presenting more information on the options this church has. Global Methodist Church is just one option of many. So that is absolutely not a done deal. Anybody else? Any other questions?
So I think we all understand the magnitude of this decision. It's a big decision. Is anybody, have we discussed or talked about within, your board of the future of the church, and I'm not talking about what's going to happen with the people in this room. I'm talking about everyone that actually goes to this church every single Sunday, that goes to VBS and Sunday school and that has grown up here. What's going to happen in the future?
That's a major concern. I think that's weighing on everybody's hearts when we sit and we talk about these issues, all the different components that we have to think about. As David said earlier, this really truly is a lose-lose situation. There's no way we come out on the other side of this without losing somebody, at least a good group of people. And the question is, what does the majority of our church want to do? And so that's what the vote is for. It goes to the congregation, and the congregation at large decides. It's not decided by church council, even despite the fact that church council has to make that decision first. It really is going to be decided by the congregation. Yes, Sam?
We have a question from online. This is from Kevin Williams. A recent email from email address of staytlumc@gmail.com was received by many people. Question, was that email address to all church members or just a select few?
I can't really speak to that because that was not from my group. That was not from the church. So I can't really speak to who it went out to. I mean,
Didn't go to everybody, went to my wife.
so there you go. Didn't go to everybody. Can't. There's no link to link back to them. Any other questions?
Question and comments. First, Jen and Dave, thank you. You and all the task force, y'all are doing a heck of a good job with under some real difficult circumstances. When you had the last church council meeting and voted not to go forward, a lot of the people, and you were getting feedback from people here and at home, I think a lot of that feedback was, how are you going to make a decision because you don't have enough information? And I feel sorry for the council because the dates that you showed up there are exactly the same thing. You got the cart before the horse. The council is trying to make a decision or recommendation to the congregation without enough information. So you're going to be in the same boat you were last time. Now, I know you can't control that. I understand that, but that's really unfortunate that's heading down that path.
That is the purpose of the questionnaire straw poll, is so council does have information from our congregation. So they will be more informed than we were the last time.
The problem is the council is going to make a recommendation to the church.
Only to send it to
go
the
forward
church
to vote or
for
not go forward to
vote.
vote.
Yeah.
And you're going to make that recommendation without enough information. And that's the first thing the people in the congregation are going to ask. It's not your
Yeah,
issue.
that's a
I
UMC thing.
understand
Yeah.
that, but it's not, again, I talked to Pastor Rainwater. It's not right. It's not the right way to treat the congregation. It's not ethically correct. And I don't think it's morally correct.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'm gonna call it. Oh.
Diane,
I was
please,
so
yes,
excited.
please.
Red. Red.
We didn't know that the Mountain Sky Conference wasn't going to give us any more information. See, we thought that if we could go back and get more information, that would help in that decision. But now we know we're not going to get, so that may also have an impact on that decision too.
Is there a question online?
Got to unmute myself. There was just a response to Kevin Williams' question from Nancy Fritchie. She said, I can speak to Kevin's question as a member of that group. I can confidently say that it went out to all members and constituents.
Just for the online, anecdotally, we're hearing it did not go out to all of that for that particular one. So not saying check your spam folders, or it's just whatever particular email address you may have registered with, however they got an email distribution list.
I just have a comment to make, and that is, Jen, I know your two ifs. And I just think that so far, the information, particularly because of our guest speakers at session 2 and 3, people tend to look at this as a, either we're going to the WMC or we're staying with the UMC. And so I think we need to continue as we go toward the vote to emphasize the fact that there are other options as well. In my personal opinion, we ought to disassociate from the Mountain Sky Conference and go to Kansas or someplace else, but that's just me.
That's fair. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate y'all being here and people online for logging in. I mean, it's hard to spend your night talking about these issues. It's not exactly the most uplifting way to spend your night. But I think we all understand the gravity of the situation, and I appreciate the time that y'all are putting in. So thank you so much for coming and for your time.